Hello, world singers. My name is Tyler.
And my name is Brooke.
And this is Cosmere Conversations.
What's up, everybody?
We back, you back, everybody's back. Let's do this. We have a very interesting episode planned
A really
for today.
fantastic episode. See what I did there?
Yes, because this episode comes from a fan.
2 fans, really.
Oh, all right.
Because the episode subject came from fan Fabienne. Thank you, Fabienne. And we also got some super interesting information on this topic from Irving.
Well, it's great that both of them have participated because today we are talking about the twins. Twinborns, that is. One of the most interesting things in Mistborn Era 2 was the introduction of Twinborns. People born who have a Allomantic ability, just a single one, because there's no more Mistborns after Lord Spook, or Lord Mistborn Spook, and have a feruchemical ability in the same person, in the same body, combining those powers that previously we only saw in the one-off of the Lord Ruler, who obviously had everything because he was born as a feruchemist, and he gave himself, when he was a sliver of infinity, the Allomantic abilities of making him a Mistborn. So he was a super duper ultra Twinborn in every single respect.
He made sure that no one else could have combined powers because they're so powerful.
It was not only something that he tried to do, but it was a key part of his philosophy about reining in the genetic spread of feruchemy because he knew the power. He basically understood the full power of feruchemy and wanted to keep it as constrained as possible. And that introduces the breeding programs and what we see in Mistborn Era 1 through the eyes of Zazed, but also through the eyes of Twindwyl? Tindwyl?
Something like that.
It's got a W in there.
She's one of the most difficult names to pronounce, I think.
Because she was a breeder of feruchemists, and had multiple children before being kind of retired from that role. So the entire system that the Lord Ruler put in place was really to prevent the creation of Twinborns. By the time we get to Mistborn Era 2, there's obviously no more Lord Ruler, but there's also no more Mistborns or full feruchemists. So we are left with Faerings and Mistings. Wonderful. And when you take a Misting who also is a Faering, you get a Twinborn. And this led to some of the coolest aspects of Mistborn Era 2. How do these powers combine? How do they work? Obviously, our main characters, Wax and Wayne, are Twinborn, and we are constantly inundated with the possibility of other Twinborns, like Miles, and multiple characters throughout the series.
It adds so much depth and complexity to this magic system. And to be honest, I find the Allomantic and metallurgic magic system to be very complex and like a little bit confusing on its own. And then when you introduce the ability for Twinborns, it just gets real bananas.
I mean, I could not understand what the heck the Lord Ruler was doing in order to stay alive. Like, even when it was explained in Mistborn Era 1, I had no ability to like
really complex
understand, because it didn't go into as much detail in Era 1 as they obviously go into in Era 2. And you didn't have like a full understanding, but it introduces compounding, which we're going to talk about in a moment. I just think that the idea of a Twinborn is a really interesting way to up the magic coolness on Scadrial without actually introducing a new magic system. Like, it's still the
Yeah.
same magic system, but now has another wrinkle into it. And
It gives you a lot of like flexibility, a lot of new possibilities open up, but it's still confined by a lot of rules. So it, doesn't feel too OP.
That is definitely true. And especially it doesn't feel too OP because of the removal of full Mistborns and full Feruchemist in Era 2. What I find so fascinating, and to the point about what you were saying about the flexibility in the Twinborns, just with the basic metals that we know of in Mistborn Era 2, there are now over 256 different combinations of possible Twinborns. Now, we are not going to go over all 256 because that would just be us sitting here reading just combination after combination after combination.
Even
after
if we
combination.
only talked about each one for like 1 minute, that would be the longest podcast.
Oh, by a long shot. I mean, that would be far longer than Gone with the Wind is an entire movie.
Let's be honest, no one would be here listening to us.
Except for like that one fan, they would just be like totally digging it. They would be like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that one. That one's great.
Or the people who have said they're listening to us like while they're on some epic hike or something. They're like, well, I have nothing else better to do.
Yeah, the travelers, the ones who are on the road trip and just like don't want to fall asleep. And so they're just like, okay, I guess this is what I got. 6 more hours of just lists. No, we're going to go over some of the different Twinborns and what it means in terms of compounding and resonance points, all of the different ways that this magic system has changed, and maybe, if we have enough time, even get into some speculation about other possible combinations in the future.
Yeah.
So, Brooke, we're looking for a basic understanding of the power of Twinborns. So do you want to start us off with like what we know, what we don't know?
Well, there's actually not very much that we do know, which is kind of weird when you think like we already have 3 books about a bunch of Twinborns and we still actually don't know all that much. Like there's a super cool chart on the Coppermind that y'all can look up, but the only Twinborn name that we have that is official and canon is the name for Wax's combination, which is he's a crasher, someone who has iron and steel combined.
And we only know that not even because Wax knows that name. It is the name given to him by, or told to him by Chrysala. Yeah. So we have this kind of interesting question about, do the people on Scadrial even name the Twinborns? Because they're very rare.
That's a good question.
They don't happen very often. We know that from Mistborn Era 2, when someone is a Fairing, like Wax, they are often invited to live with and stay with the remaining genetic lineage of the original Feruchemist. Wax obviously had that experience, and it's kind of like a almost elvish type thing. Like that's the vibe I got from it, kind of like a Rivendell. Like they wanted to be separate and have their own laws, and they were a little bit smug and superior, a little bit of like, we're better than everybody else.
Like, we have the old blood.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. The remnants of the original Feruchemist, like Zazed and Tindwell. The obvious interesting aspect, of course, is that doesn't work out. It doesn't work out for Wax, but it also doesn't work out for any Twinborns, because you can't be a Twinborn unless you intermix sexually through with a misting, right? Like you have to introduce both genetic sides of the equation, and it's almost like they're trying to keep the genetic line pure.
It is kind of interesting because they're doing to themselves what the Lord Ruler like forced upon them.
Exactly. They're
like
choosing.
Sazed, like looking down as his, harmony god self would be like, dudes, what are y'all doing? Like,
not what I wanted.
We escaped this.
Yeah, they've kind of reverted a little bit. And so there is a interesting cultural question about, why do Twinborns exist? How rare are they? We know that the Crashers, Wax's combination, there are only 3 recorded Crashers in the 300 years since the sacrifice of Vin and the recreation of Scadrial by Harmony. So that one's pretty rare. We should assume probably that all the other combinations are equally or even more rare.
Or more, yeah, because I feel like a combination like Miles.
Yes.
Would
that's super rare because it's
even more rare.
Let's go over kind of what the 3 that we know in Wax, Wayne, and Miles, just because they're right there on the front. So Wax is a coin shot, which means he is alamantically gifted with steel, and he is a skimmer, or has the ability to burn iron as his feruchmal power, and that allows him to increase or decrease and store his weight. There have been questions.
Mass.
Yeah, there have been questions about what exactly is going on with Wax's increase of weight / mass. Brandon has come out and said it does not line up with physics. It is one of those things that he is clearly like, this is fictional and you just have to let it go.
Yeah, he's like, it makes sense to a point, but at a point, it's magic.
Yeah, exactly. So don't get too tied up on different aspects, even if you want to really nerd out on Twinborns and what is going on, because you're not going to be able to solve that problem.
We did get an interesting comment, though, from Irving, like I was mentioning earlier. Do we want to go over that real quick since we're talking about the way Wax's powers interact?
Yes, because this is specifically about the combination of his powers. And we mentioned this in our last episode. Irving reached out, and with a background in physics, he was more than happy to explain.
He was very kind and explained it in an easily accessible way, which I appreciate.
Our dumb brains over here.
I'm like, I took botany. I don't know physics.
And I took stats. I didn't even do botany. So can you tell us what Irving has reported in about the ability that Wax has when he is steel pushing and flying through the air? He drops his weight, and that gives him a additional boost of speed. That's the layman's way I would describe what's happening. Can you tell us what Irving says is the physics behind it?
Well, essentially, he describes momentum as being equal to velocity times mass. So how fast you're going and your mass. And so if you want your momentum to stay the same, you have to increase one of those things as the other one decreases. Inverse relationship.
And we know that, at least in our world, momentum would be preserved because of Newton's law of conservation of momentum. So momentum should be conserved if the rules of Scadrial are relatively the same as our planet. And in order for momentum to be conserved or preserved, for some preservation, the velocity and mass have to have this inverse relationship. If you want the actual physics, don't come to us because we're not physics teachers.
True.
But it is interesting to, at least from a reader's perspective, to know that when something is happening, even if it's not being described like a physics book, Brandon does have like this background where he's doing a little bit of the research and keeping consistent. Yeah,
which we've talked about before is one of Brandon Sanderson's strong suits, is that he really does set up these well thought out, well researched rules to his magic systems.
Yeah, he actually has his own podcast. Of course, everybody has a podcast. But his podcast on hard versus soft magic does kind of get into this. Obviously, Brandon has a little bit more of a tendency to do hard magic systems, which would be more grounded in reality, where soft magic systems are more fantastical, Harry Potter or a Gandalf from Lord of the Rings being like prime examples, and something like Quoth from The Name of the Wind or Brandon Sanderson's characters being more of like hard magic systems. There are a lot others.
I think it's interesting that he also takes into account the specifics of each planet that he writes on. Like, he knows exactly what the gravity is like on each planet and how that affects the magic system. And I think Scadrial is like ground zero, right?
Scadrial is often seen as, because
the planet itself is the most similar in like size to Earth.
Yes.
And so he uses Scadrial as the sort of neutral zone. Like, this would be essentially the same as Earth. And then from there, things are denoted as being like plus or minus Scadrial standard.
Yeah. And for example, we know that Rashar is a planet that has a much heavier gravity pull, because I believe it's a larger planetary body. And that has a whole bunch of effects, not only on the individual people.
No, I thought it was the other way.
Is it?
I thought it had less gravity, which is why the animals can get so big.
Craziness. That's right. I'm sorry. Reversed it in my brain because I'm not Brandon Sanderson. That is obviously a super cool thing, and it comes into play in every single story. I remember that the comic White Sand also has some important aspects of the planetary system. Oh yeah, I forgot. # all spoilers. We can talk about this. But like, the planet is tidally locked with its own sun, which is important because the sun is also a representative of their shard, or is kind of like their shard. And so they have the day side and night side on Taldane. All of these things, super fun to dive into.
Okay, we're getting sidetracked. Back to the Twinborn.
So we have Wax, Crasher.
Wayne uses Bendalloy as an allomancer, which is the power that enables him to have his little time bubble, and then he stores gold as a Feruchemist.
So, which gives him the ability to heal. And we know that Wayne's combination is incredibly powerful, and would probably be more so if the dude ever used guns, but it really does fit so perfectly with his own philosophy and mentality and fighting style. It's really cool in both Wax and Wayne that their personalities have either come to reflect their powers or were created because of their powers.
Yeah, it's like a chicken and an egg kind of scenario. Because I think Wayne actually does talk about how part of the reason, obviously there's a bigger reason he doesn't fight with guns, but at least part of the reason is because it's nearly impossible to fire a gun out of a time bubble. So it makes more sense for him to fight with the dueling canes, which he can do with or without the time bubble.
That's an excellent point, because what is going on for a Bendalloy misting, which are known as sliders, is that they are existing inside of a bubble, and the Bendalloy, when burnt, pushes on time so that time passes more quickly inside the bubble than around them. Now, I find any fluctuations or playing with time to be a really fun thing for authors to do. And I think that authors can normally do it better than even like movie representations. Like, I've never seen as good a representation of time travel or time manipulation in a movie as I've seen in books.
It's just such a slippery slope.
It's a huge slippery slope, but Brandon keeps it pretty tight.
Yeah, I think he does too.
Pretty contained.
Especially because, like, it's just a bubble. You know, he confines it to a specific amount of space, which makes it a little bit easier to handle in a story, I think.
I agree, but it does introduce all of these questions about, like, faster than light travel, and how can you break the speed of light because, Einstein and stuff. But there are kind of questions that can be asked, but we don't need to ask all that much. It should be pointed out that bend alloy is a very rare alloy, a combination of two metals, and is also pretty expensive. It's one of the more limited metals, and it's something that Wayne is often kind of shown struggling to get a bunch of, unlike Wax, who can down a whole bunch of his metals, being iron and steel. Wayne is limited because of the rarity, which I think is another good limit.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Going back to what we were saying before, not only are they limited by like birth, that these powers are not like super common or anything like that, they're also limited by the amount that they're able to either ingest or wear as a Farouk mist, and then the availability of those metals comes into play.
So those are our two heroes, and then of course we also have the famous Miles
100 lives.
Yeah, he's so scary because of course he is going to, much like the Lord Ruler, be an example of a compounder, someone who is a Twinborn, who has the same metal, in this case gold, that they can burn elementically and store investiture in feruchemically. This makes Miles obviously one of the hardest characters in the Cosmere to kill, sometimes being compared to Hoyd in his ability to stay alive or resist and heal from otherwise fatal accidents, incidents.
But, good note here. He is dead, so.
That is true. We do know this to be the case. I think that one of the things that was cleared up for me when it comes to compounders happen in Era 2 with Miles, when you begin to understand a little bit better what the Lord Ruler was doing. Like reading Mistborn Era 2 helped me figure out what the Lord Ruler was doing, because
totally.
Not only was the Lord Ruler compounding gold, just like Miles, to heal himself from crazy stuff. Like they said, he was flayed alive. He was decapitated.
Yeah.
He was stabbed, obviously, like right through the heart by Kelsier before he just like pulled it out and sliced Kelsier. So, but also he was storing youth, or his age, inside of atium feruchemically. So he was resistant to aging and able to heal himself from the effects of aging, so he could keep dumping in multiple different lifetimes into atium and then draw from that to stay alive for the 1,000 years. I didn't really fully understand the power of compounding and the way that it was used by the Lord Ruler until we got into Mistborn Era 2.
Compounding, though, actually has more to do with being able to burn the metal that you've stored investiture in.
For sure. Obviously, we know that atium compounding would not be, but atium feruchemically can store youth. So
yeah, he had a bunch of things that were clearly to his advantage. I just want to be clear that actual compounding means that you are storing something in a metal and then you are swallowing and burning that metal.
That specific metal. And that's what Miles is able to do. He stores his own health inside of a gold nugget, burns that elementically, and Brandon explained with compounding, you have the power of allomancy and feruchemy. You draw power from the other place, the spiritual realm and the shard of preservation, through the metal, and it recognizes the power that is already stored. It's like, oh, this is healing. I know how to do that. And so you get the power of feruchemy, but boosted by energy from the other place, being preservation. I think compounding is one of the least explored aspects of the Scadrian universe, and one that I am most excited to possibly see in the future, some additional compounders or some compounding that happens because of technology.
Totes. What are some of the other possible combinations? Do we just want to speculate wildly and talk about what we think would be cool?
I mean, I guess now is the time to speculate wildly. Let's start off with, now, fans have come up with many names for these things, but remember, the only name that is actually canon is a crasher. That's the only combination that we truly know and have seen in book or that Brandon has mentioned. Everything else we say is kind of just fun.
So we are just going to take a gander at this chart and call out random stuff. Like I am looking at a copper keep. What's a copper keep?
Copper keep is a compounder who can burn and store in copper.
Ooh, okay. So copper in Furukumi stores knowledge, right? Yeah. And in Allomancy,
it provides the copper cloud, or what's nicknamed the smoker ability.
Oh, that's right.
Basically the ability to
shield yourself from other Allomancy.
Yes. Well, and shield yourself from the ability for people to detect your Allomancy.
Yeah.
I think that another interesting one is the...
What would happen if you burned the metal that you stored knowledge in?
All right, so the question that you just asked, I have no idea. Nobody has any idea. We're just making all of these things up. So here we go. I think that if you can create a cloud of kind of protection around you with copper, and you can store knowledge inside of copper as a Furukamist, being a compounder would allow you to create a field of knowledge around you that was kind of like a movie, but like a hologram.
Oh my
Basically,
gosh.
you were projecting your knowledge, your information, your data around you in kind of like a cool, futuristic hologram-like thing built on magic and investiture.
Interesting idea.
Completely ridiculous.
Love
none
it.
None of these are real, but they're just for you guys. So one of the things that we did see in book 3 of Era 2 was a steel runner, a Furukamist who could store up their speed. I thought a really interesting power would be to take Wax's ability of steel pushing and combine it with a steel runner. So you would be able to compound your steel abilities.
Dang. You would be so fast?
You would be able to fly hella fast because you could, push off like Wax does and fly through the air, but do that at incredible speeds.
I wonder if that's something that they're going to use in their like magical technology to create space travel.
You damn right it is. That's exactly what I think it is. You're going to amplify the power of like their ships that we see in book 3, where you are, I think, going to create kind of a rocket-like ability, but maybe even more powerful, and that will be their propulsion system.
Cool. Another one I think is cool on here would be a strong arm, someone who is both a rioter and a pewter arm. So you would be super strong. Like you would be the ultimate boxer. You would just be like super strong, and you would just be able to like make the people around you really like aggressive.
Emotional, yeah.
Yeah.
Pump people up. So literally you could get everyone angry at you and then beat the crap out of them.
Yeah, and just be like the worst heckler in the world.
Oh, man, that would be real bad.
Okay, so if a Twinborn had the same ability as Wayne to burn bend alloy and make the time bubble, and then they also had the Furukumo power of Nicrosil, which stores investiture, obviously the coolest metal that we don't know that much about. But I wonder if you could like tap additional investiture, would you be able to like extend your time bubble either like for longer or make it bigger or something?
We do know that savantism, like Spook becomes in Era 1, is possible with all the different metals, but would basically never happen with bend alloy because it's so rare. But we do know what would happen, and that is that someone who was a savant with bend alloy would be able to not only create a bigger time bubble and allow more time to exist for them, but also the bubble could move with them. Remember one of Wayne's big limitations.
Yeah, he sets it up and then it has to stay there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that maybe if you had additional investiture to pull from through Nickersil, you could conceivably become like an instant savant in whatever your paired misting power was. Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Exactly. It would be like you don't have to do all the work and you get to become a savant, maybe.
Nickersil is so cool, because then that begs the question though, like, how do you store investiture in it?
That's true. Like what are you draining from yourself in order to store?
Like it almost seems like you would have to tap your spirit web.
Something like
almost
that,
like a hemalurgy kind of thing.
Ooh, maybe. That's dark. I do think Bend Alloy has a very interesting, yet probably will never be explored Feruchmal power, which is to store nutrition and calories. This to me is like one of the most practical in our world.
I would really love that.
Yeah. Okay. So what you can do, it's known as a subsumer, is that if you were a Feruchemist who only had Bend Alloy, you could eat large quantities of food without becoming full and then tap the metal mine to allow you to give yourself nutrition without eating. I think this would be amazing. However, it does only work with food and not with liquid. So you would still have to drink normally.
I mean, I would be okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine you have your one big meal a day or a week or a month. You literally just eat all you possibly can. Like everyone, if we just all humans were like this now, we could just have like one big party day where we just like ate everything and you're just like shoving every single thing inside your face, and then you like wouldn't have to eat for the next month because you could just tap the nutrition.
That'd be so great.
This actually might be something that is like conceivably possible in the future through like genetic engineering. And like CRISPR technology. Not, you could turn off some of the genes that like tell your body to store food. And so it would just become a matter of, I'm not saying this is entirely possible. I'm saying it could be possible one day, but your body could just, instead of always wanting to imagine that you're about to die or imagine that you're about to go like on a long hike through the woods for the next 2 weeks without food, as our ancestors may have, it would just be like, eat whatever you want, and after adult phase, you don't want to do this to kids, obviously, but you know, you could just like have a couple of your genes turned off, and it would just be like, all right, now your body won't store fat as much or like it would normally do. I really want that now.
Another good one to point out on this chart is aluminum, since we know that aluminum is one of the most, if not the most, Cosmere significant metal.
Yep.
And
multiple planets have aluminum as a part of the storyline.
And we know that it blocks investiture and it has a bunch of cool properties. Just adding to those cool properties, aluminum as a Feruchmal metal stores identity, which again is one of those things that's like question mark. What does this actually mean? But something that we do know is that a aluminum fairing who fills an aluminum mine with basically all of their identity, and then they fill another metal mine, they are able to produce a metal mine that essentially any Feruchemist can use because it won't have the stamp of their identity.
It's not tied specifically to that Feruchemist.
Because that Feruchemist doesn't have an identity anymore.
Exactly.
Weird.
Their identity list, and so they are able to tap another person's metal mine.
What does that make them? Are they like a zombie?
No, I think they're kind of like a person from Nalthis without a breath.
Oh, a drab.
Yeah, but like even more so. Maybe, but not like full zombie because they're still like there.
And like, not like, what do they call them? The dead.
Yes.
Like walkers in
the zombies, the actual zombies. But I think that there is a very important thing, and this is why we mentioned aluminum, because we know that there has to be some type of jump in technology on Scadrial to get to a point when their powers are not tied to individuals, where it becomes more of a universal system of just regular technology.
So this is obviously going to become like common practice.
I think so. I think that this aspect of like draining the spiritual identity that is attached to a specific metal mind or specific abilities has to become a bigger part of the Cosmere.
That's like a little bit weird though, because think about it. Then we get into this like conversation about people kind of becoming machines, like even more so, because imagine being one of those fairings. You go to work, you store everything that makes you, like in a little metal mind, you put it in your locker, you go to work, make a bunch of stuff that like as a zombie, and then like put yourself back on essentially and like go home for the day.
Creepy.
Weird.
Yeah, that's
super weird. I don't like that at all.
I am very interested to see how that plays out, because obviously we know aluminum is important, but it has something like that has to happen. Some disconnect between the spiritual stamp has to exist. We just don't know the form in which it's going to take yet. All right, here's a little compounder / Twinborn that I'm interested in, and that is cadmium, which is, as we know, Marasi's main misting power, which creates the time bubble but does the reverse of Wayne. So she slows down and everyone else is going at normal speed.
Which
sucks.
is a weird power.
Yeah, and she basically, hates herself and nobody likes her.
Yeah, she's just like, my power is so dumb, I'm useless.
Until she figures out how cool it is, because she can distribute her power into the little cube device and then throw it, make it a mobile power, and that slows down other people who are caught near the cube.
But before they even have that, she essentially enables them to be able to kill Miles.
That's
so
100% true. Oh, she's
go
hugely,
Marasi. Hello.
She is very important. No one's like dissing on Marasi.
Well, I'm just saying.
However, the power next to the other ones does seem cool, really lame.
It's true.
However, the Furukami power of cadmium is to store breath. They're nicknamed gaspers because they can hyperventilate to over-oxygenate their blood and then store that breath inside of the cadmium and then not need to breathe. So you could see this as like being awesome for diving or whatnot, but the mention of breath to me stood out in a big way, since we were just talking about Nalthis. Would it be possible to store breaths inside of cadmium if you were a Feruchemist? Could you?
I wish, but I don't think it would actually work that way, because
now we're talking about Twinborns from different planets and different magic systems. Like if you were a Nalthian who could absorb breaths, and you were a Twinborn Feruchemi, a Therian who's a gasper, could you
but listen,
take the breaths and store them magically inside the cadmium?
Okay, you're really excited about this, but no is the answer. Because they're not literal physical breaths on Nalthis. It's investiture, so we would be back at Nikrasil.
That is probably likely. However, people on the internet reach out to us, Cosmere Convos, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, tell me that I'm right and Brooke is wrong, even though I know that's never the case.
Ooh, a cadmium Twinborn would be called a chrysalis.
Oh, you mean a cadmium compounder would be a chrysalis? What would that even do? So someone who can create the little speed bubble around them, and
you would just be able to hold your breath for a very long time.
No, you would be able to hold your breath for a very long time inside of a bubble that was moving you slower. So you actually would hold your breath for a normal amount of time. That would be the worst compounder ever.
Let's move on to other ways that metallurgic powers could potentially interact with other planetary magic systems.
Tell me more. Like, what would happen if someone from Rashar showed up to fight someone from Scadro?
We do have a word of Brandon that a fully filled metal mind could block a shard blade.
Now, why? Is investiture
Yeah.
meets anti-investiture.
Investiture.
Yeah, it's just like, is it a shard blade and a spren blade? I would assume, because they're normally
Yeah.
treated as the same.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess, because if you think about it, like shard blades can be stopped by shard plate, which is just plate that's infused with investiture.
Good point.
So essentially, it just takes investiture to stop investiture.
Okay, so if you were like Zazed, who had multiple full metal mines all over his body in that super awesome fight in the Era 1, he could conceivably also block multiple shard blades.
Yeah, so you could have like your big, bracers on your arms, and then you could also use those as
little
deflectors. Shield blocker. Yeah.
Awesome. So Zazed is now even cooler and a better fighter than but the first time he tapped one, would it become less effective at blocking or completely ineffective?
I think because the quote says fully filled, I think it does have to be like completely filled. You wouldn't be able to tap it.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. Speaking of bringing on crazy swords, tell me about some Nightblood. What happens if Nightblood is on Scadrial?
Well, the way that investiture works on Scadrial, a Allomancer or a Frucumist would have to be actively using their power in order to generate that investiture that Nightblood feeds on. Otherwise, you're just going to die really fast.
Oh, he would just like instantly drain you if you had no access to investiture. So you would have to just be...
Yeah, the only reason anyone can wield him is because like on Nalthis, they all have a breath. So at the very least, they have that for Nightblood to take.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on Rashar, obviously they have Stormlight. Yeah.
I think that it would be interesting to see, because Nightblood has been to more than 2 planets.
Probably.
I believe this is a word of Brandon, that we know, obviously, Nalthis and Rashar, because we've seen him there. But I believe that he has been to more than 2 planets. I wonder if he's actually ever been to Scadrial in some of his journeys with either Vasher/Vivenna. And I would be very interested in the timeline. Like, when is Nightblood introduced, possibly, on Scadrial? There has to be some type of crossover point, in my opinion. Just like there was with the creation of Nightblood in the first place, where someone, maybe the 5 scholars, got exposed to a shard blade and then tried to copy that with Nightblood. I wonder if something similar happens on Scadrial. Like, you get introduced to this super powerful device, Nightblood, and then you want to have it yourself. And so then they start experimenting with more and more of these Twinborn powers and these combinations of powers, looking to create a Nightblood. Maybe that jumpstarts their technology.
I don't think that would be possible.
I'm not saying that it's going to happen.
Although,
I'm saying it's a way to imagine why they jump again in their technological progress. Like, how do they get to the future of having spaceships? They have to have some type of jump in technology, and maybe it's inspired by like a meeting with a Nightblood or a meeting with other characters.
I think there actually is a word of Brandon about this, and now I'm not remembering exactly what it is, but I think since aluminum stores identity, that's what we just said.
Yes.
If you like stored enough identity in like an aluminum sword, maybe it would become like a Nightblood type thing.
Oh, you're saying it would be like yourself in a sword?
Yeah, I guess.
In sword form?
But then I don't, but
it
around. Wouldn't really be alive, I guess. It would just have you inside of it.
But then, like, could you think and process and interact in the same way? Is Nightblood a stored person?
No, Nightblood is just a lot of breaths. It's just awakened metal.
Okay, but a person's breath is kind of tied to their spiritual web identity, right?
Yeah. But then, like, Nightblood is a combination of all of those things, and he's not a one
Single
specific
person.
Personality. He has become his own personality, kind of.
Definitely true. That's curious.
Maybe, what if you had a bunch of aluminum fairings pour all of their identities?
They force create
weird. I don't like that at all.
Take away your identity. What about...
And then you would have to like kill them. If you killed them, would their identities stay inside of the sword?
If you kill their bodies?
Yeah.
I would assume so.
Ugh.
That they become, oh man, I think there's another book series like
a
that.
great plot of some weird aluminum horror story.
Yeah,
on
basically.
Scadrial, yeah.
What about hemalurgy? Because obviously we know hemalurgy, super powerful, super good hack on the different investiture systems. What happens if an allomancer burns a hemalurgic spike?
This one I thought was super interesting. If an allomancer tries to burn a hemalurgic spike, then the allomancer's spiritual DNA becomes spliced to the spiritual DNA of the person who was like spiked by that spike.
Well said. The consequences of this are not yet known because we haven't seen anything like it. However,
but like, what the heck?
Spiritual
Frankenstein human.
I mean, we already kind of have like Frankenstein humans with just hemalurgy already. It is kind of like a very Frankenstein-like situation when you have, humans being like pounded through to create another more powerful human. I find the idea of the allomancer's spiritual DNA being split very interesting for similar reasons that we were just talking about with identity. It's like the allomancer's in two places at once. Their spiritual DNA is now part of the person who was spiked.
Yeah, do they have like some not telekinetic?
Yeah, telepathic.
There you go, telepathic. Like a telepathic ability between those two people.
I mean, ooh, that's very interesting.
Right?
Okay, so
because like on some level, like you are the same person. Or maybe you would just have a weird, like you would have deja vu about things happening in that other person's life and be like, I feel like I'm in danger. But it's the other person that's in danger.
Well, as we know, deja vu is just them changing something about the Matrix. Obviously, hemalurgy is the other route that things can go down on Scadrial.
And Brandon, actually, this is funny. I can't remember if it was Brandon Sanderson or if it was Chris.
Same person.
A
really.
character
Yeah.
who said this, but one of them, either the fictional character or the real life author, said that hemalurgy is the most Cosmere significant magic system.
I think that we definitely have seen the potential for hemalurgy. We know that much like the technology we're starting to see in Era 2 of Mistborn, it allows people to take or steal powers that they would not otherwise have and use those powers. But hemalurgy is so much more destructive of ruin, obviously, but we have a process that is amplifying powers or is capable of amplifying powers that I think could create a lot of this new technology that we're talking about as a possibility on Scadrial. In the same way we were saying earlier about how the ship's propulsion in the future could be some type of compounding, there also could be some aspects of hemalurgy.
One of the interesting things about hemalurgy is that there is sort of an extra layer that comes into play that, I don't know, I guess you could consider it either a benefit or a negative, because you have to spike the person that you want to receive those powers in the correct place as well. Like you can't just go spiking people, but it kind of takes this like acupuncture or Chinese medicine type approach of there being specific bind points on the body, between 200 and 300 different bind points on the human body. And then depending on like the metal that you're spiking with and the place, the bind point that you're putting it, it changes the effect that you get from that hemalurgic spike.
For example, if you go straight through the heart with a bronze or pewter spike, you can give the hemalurgic effect of alamantic copper or feruchmal steel. Why? I don't know.
Yeah. But the other interesting thing about that is that Brandon has mentioned these bind points in other magic systems as well, like the ones on Rashar.
Oh, I didn't know that. So,
yeah, like I think even the shard plate, depending on like
yes,
where
it
you
does
put
have
the
to-
gemstones
yeah.
on the plate, it like does something different.
It can have a enhancing or dehancing effect on like how strong that plate is.
Yeah.
Could you make like space boots where you just put all this stuff on the bottom and then you like flew like a
Probably.
Now, most famously, because of the Inquisitors, we know that spikes are often driven straight into someone's eyes. But importantly, we also see that with a single spike through the eyes of Kelsier in Mistborn Era 2. So what is the significance of the eye socket?
If they are spiked with steel, then it's speculated that the person would get elementic steel and elementic iron.
Now, we know that our good friend Kelsier was considered the best steel and iron pusher. Remember, it was like Vin learning from all the different people, and then she finally realized what Kelsier's thing he was good at, even though he was a Mistborn. His specialty was steel and iron. He was like near, savant level, or not savant because that's a very specific thing, but he was a very good steel and iron pusher. I think it would be 100% on brand if Kelsier in Era 2 spiked by a steel spike through his eye is once again a steel and iron pusher.
Totally.
All right, well, we know there was a bunch of speculation this episode. We know there was a bunch of just playing around with fun ideas that people have come up with or combinations that we haven't actually seen. But Twinborns, compounders, hemalurgy, and the new technology that's being created on Scadrial are all big, important questions in the Cosmere. We know that right now there's a strong genetic and spiritual web link to these powers. But the big question is what happens when we separate the genetic and spiritual web link? What happens when we can give these powers to everyone? What happens when you can just start using these powers as a normal person on Scadrial?
Creepy is what we have decided.
Or societal advancement. Like there's the possibility
it's true
that this is their industrial revolution, even though they have already had their industrial revolution
and then they descend into dystopia.
That's totally possible because there is speculation that the Mistborn Era 3 is going to be in like the 1980s.
Yeah, I think
and
that's
I could
supposed
totally
to be...
see like a 1984 type of vibe going on, like dark, like Harmony messed up a little bit.
Oh no.
And it goes bad for a while because of all of this, we'll call it universality of misting and faring powers. And this technology could go in a bad route by basically allowing evil people or even just like normal regular Joes to have all this power. And then Mistborn Era 4 brings it back and shows that after another time jump, they have figured it out and are now a spacefaring race.
Or they're fleeing from their dystopian planet into space. Just like the Rasharians.
I just had a moment. What if they are the Rasharians?
Ooh, weird.
What if Scadrial is
the planet?
Ashen?
No, it's not.
It can't be.
It's not.
It definitely cannot be. Someone tell me, like, get angry on the internet, as I know some people do, and yell at me why Scadrial cannot be Ashen.
Because they're different planets that are literally on a star map.
Oh, well, on a star map, yeah. But I'm saying intellectually, why can Scadrial not be the beginning of the Rasharian story? The thing that they escape from, the technology that... No, it's not going to work out. I talked myself out of it right here. I don't need you to get angry at the end.
Well, that was just a great example of the rampant speculation encompassed in this episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We appreciate having you out there, and especially when you reach out and talk to us on Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, email. Keep it up. Until next time, life before death,
Strength before weakness.
journey before destination.